Let's say a few words briefly on the latest developments with China. So we've now went ahead and announced that Huawei will be scrapped. This is a good decision. I welcome it. Um, it should never have been given the green light in the first place, but now that it has been, it's announced that this will not be going ahead. That's good. I welcome it. I do get the impression in recent months the Johnson administration has been toughening its resolve with Beijing. For a long time, I feel it had been somewhat sitting on the fence. But the offers to allocate refuge to BNO passport holders who come to the UK, the toughening rhetoric with China, the cancelling of this Huawei deal, things going on that I feel are in the right direction. Um, Mike Pompeo has been very vocal about, in recent days, particularly about the South China Sea. Um, and of course, Beijing has responded to this by claiming that his claims about the illegality of the maritime empire, as he puts it, um, are baseless. They also claim that the concerns we have around Huawei are baseless. Um, what's interesting is Liu Xiaoming, the Chinese ambassador to the UK, um, claims that our concerns about Huawei are baseless. But this just proves the fact that he is reacting the way he is, just proves that the CCP has a vested interest in this. I mean, Huawei itself says, oh no, we're never going to hand over state secrets. But constitutionally, they are bound to do that. All Chinese companies are controlled by the state. So no matter what reassurances Huawei gives, they have to do it. If the Chinese government asks them to hand over sensitive information that they may have to do it. Even if they, for the sake of argument, didn't want to, they'd have to. They're bound to do that. So it's always been a bit of a laughable claim that the communist regime makes that that's not the situation because it's so clearly is. Here's the thing. Hua Chunying, the spokeswoman, she's one of the most prominent faces of the Chinese Communist Party, has said that the UK is a small player, a small part of the Huawei program. This is becoming sort of symbolic and representative of Chinese diplomacy of late. It's kind of to belittle and insult adversaries. You know, they called Australia chewing gum on our shoes. Now they're saying the UK is a small part. Oh, they're not important. It doesn't really matter. This arrogance and these insults can work to an extent insofar as galvanizing kind of nationalistic, jingoistic rhetoric to outsiders. And it may work with individual adversaries. Now, I believe that we need to be absolutely robust, not only in being assertive with what China is doing, but in standing by our allies, which is the Five Eyes nations, which is Western European nations, which is other Asian nations, which is any free nation has a stake in standing up to Beijing's bullying. Um, so Five Eyes, of course, United States, UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand are Western European partners. Um, I really think that the long-held Western strategy of placating China has not worked. It just hasn't. Um, and I think we're finally starting to realize that. I think any notion of returning to the Cameron Osborne policy, and I'm not saying it was just them, but I do think they exhibited this particularly. I think that's going out the window now because I think it's gradually dawning on diplomats and politicians and others who are important in this that it won't work. This regime only understands power, it only understands force. And I honestly think that, of course, if we scrap Huawei, if there's sanctions on China because of Xinjiang or Hong Kong or the South China Sea, of course there'll be retaliations. And that is, it's a fight we need to be prepared for. And further down the line, if CGTN loses its license, I imagine there will be reprisals against the BBC and other Western networks in China. But frankly, that's something we'll just have to risk. Um, the alternative, the alternative is doing nothing The alternative is basically watching this arrogant, thuggish regime do as it pleases. I think it's pretty incredible for the Chinese government to be talking about international laws when they have violated so many. Certainly with Hong Kong, they tore up the Sino-British Joint Declaration, which clearly stipulated that Hong Kong would remain autonomous until 2047. It's now 2020, 27 years before that date. They've torn that up. Hong Kong is no longer autonomous and everything but name. That's essentially what happened. So these current tensions, as far as I'm concerned, have been entirely brought on by China and its ambitions. Um, I think a lot of this, and this is speculation on my part, but I think a lot of it is wanting to save face. I think it's kind of trying to rekindle a sense of national pride from the century of humiliation. Now, it's kind of understandable. China doesn't want to feel it's humiliated again. It wants to be have an assertive role in the world. The problem is, this isn't just about being assertive. It's not just about, well, we can stand on our own feet now. We're a proud nation. We're a strong nation. China is actively interfering in other countries. As Mike Pompeo said, I think he's right. This isn't just about human rights within China, bad enough as that is. China is actively trying to undermine other nations. That is why we have every right to um, to have a stake in this. Not only a right, it's a responsibility. This is going to be a very difficult fight, I think. It may be even more complex in the Cold War because we are in a different world. There's the inclusion of social media. There's digital technology that didn't exist then. There's other aspects that weren't around at the time of the last Cold War. That is the 1945 to 1991 Cold War. So in some ways, this might be more complicated. I mean, with the Cold War, it was a, a tense, ongoing situation of at any point the two superpowers could annihilate each other. It was very dangerous, but it was very clear cut. With this, I think it's more complicated, like I say, because of the prevalence of digital media, social media, the internet. There's a lot of things that didn't exist then that do exist now that complicate things. But unfortunately, it just reiterates that we cannot trust this regime. In my opinion, I mean, CCP has been lying to the Chinese people for 71 years, so why on earth would they be upfront with foreign adversaries? They wouldn't. I honestly think the only strategy they have, the only strategy, is power. And maintaining that power at any price. And the rest of the world needs to wake up to it.